Okay, so we've seen the anyway, two of the three reasons Rachel gives why most contemporary moral philosophers tend to reject natural law theory. What's worth exploring at this point some more, though, is something that comes up in effect very briefly as his third reason to reject natural law theory. It's the question of whether there's a significant connection between moralness and naturalness. Right? The idea that there is such a connection comes up sometimes and in certain places in our moral thinking, perhaps, as he notes, most often with respect to certain questions of sexual morality. Right? And the thought, the line of thinking involved is a line of thinking apparently according to which something's being natural makes it right, something's being unnatural makes it wrong. So what we want to do now is pursue that line of thinking a little bit further, right? And if we can go to PowerPoint, we can begin by raising, at least in an initial form, what seems to be the key issue here. Now you might want to replace the period at the end of this with a question mark. All right, if we can, yeah. So, I mean, Rachel's raises this issue. It's actually the first of the criticisms he gives of natural law theory. And he does this very quickly, right? So this is the final paragraph on 55. He says, first, the idea that what's natural is good seems open to obvious counterexamples. Sometimes what's natural is bad. People naturally care much more about themselves than they do about strangers, but this is regrettable. Disease occurs naturally, but disease is bad. Children are naturally self-centered, but parents don't think this is a good thing. I think actually, the line Rachel's takes there is the right line to take. But, I mean, he does it in that paragraph very, very quickly, right? The way in which he does it very, very quickly is he doesn't pursue the question what natural might mean, right? And, I mean, in other treatments of this sort of issue at more length, that's what people tend to do, right? They ask, okay, so what could natural mean, and what possible interpretations of natural might a person be appealing to here, right? Rather than, as Rachel says in that very quick paragraph, sort of, you know, taking for granted that we know what it means. Nonetheless, I mean, as I say, my own inclination is to think that the conclusion he comes to is the right one. Let me try to demonstrate that to you by considering some possible interpretations of natural and arguing that none of these are such that when we plug them into those principles, whatever's natural is morally correct, whatever's unnatural is morally wrong, we get true principles out. But I'll also, I mean, if you know, in the course of this, any of you can come up with other interpretations of natural for which you think this works better, then suggest them, and we'll see what comes of it. Okay. All right, so here are somewhere, yeah, here. Here are some, I think, standard, familiar ways of interpreting natural. And then below them is the claim I want to make, illustrating it with respect to these interpretations, but open also to others. All right, so let's go over this a bit, taking these in turn. Start with the first interpretation, where natural means normal. Look, I mean, if natural means normal, we don't want to buy the principles, whatever's natural is morally correct, whatever's unnatural is morally wrong. An easy way to see that is to think of cases of what we take to be abnormal virtue, right? We think some people are, you know, much more morally virtuous than the average person is. A standard familiar example is Mother Teresa as normally conceived, right? Mother Teresa as normally conceived is, or was, someone who was much more virtuous than the average person, much more prepared to sacrifice her own well-being to help others, right? On this interpretation of natural, right, plugged into the principles we had, it would then follow that, you know, Mother Teresa's behavior was morally incorrect, but we don't think that. That is, we don't think that sort of statistical normality is a guarantee of moral virtue and statistical abnormality a guarantee of moral vice. Second, consider being non-artificial, right? Again, I mean, this is a very, I think, very standard meaning of natural, right? I mean, we quite often contrast the natural with the artificial, and it's one kind of familiar opposition in which we find the concept of naturalness, right? But this one, I think, it for a different reason, is a non-starter if you're attempting to use naturalness as a guide to morality, right? Because look, I mean, the question here is the question, I mean, the question you have to ask to apply or to plug in non-artificiality into these principles to get moral guidance. You've got to decide, okay, so are human actions artificial or not? You could actually either go either, you could go either way on that, I think, right? You could say, well, you know, it's natural for humans to act, so they're, you know, all human actions are natural. Or you could say, well, you know, human actions are all sort of human creations, and in that sense they're sort of the products of artifice, so they're all artificial, right? But look, either way, you're going to get moral principles that are a non-starter out of this little project here, because either you're going to get all actions are natural, so they're all morally correct, but that's not right. I mean, some of them are correct and some of them aren't. Or you're going to get they're all artificial, so none of them are morally correct. And again, that's not right. I mean, some of them are morally right and some of them are morally wrong. Right? So, if by natural you mean non-artificial, you've not got a meaning of natural that will plausibly allow you to use naturalness to determine moral correctness. Consider finally that, unless you guys want to suggest others afterwards, the meaning in accord with evolutionary function. Here, what we have in mind, right, specifications of the purpose of stuff which are in a way compatible with modern science, which may seem to contradict something we said earlier, and if you push me I'll explain why it doesn't, but otherwise we'll leave it. Specifications of purpose generated by evolutionary theory, often actually when people write and talk about this by sort of evolutionary speculation, right? But the thought here is that you can talk about the purpose of usually human traits, aspects of human behavior, by appeal to stories about what caused them to evolve, right? What sort of evolutionary pressures led to there being such things, right? So, people who develop such stories, right, will sometimes do things like explain people's tendency to recur to, in a different connection to an example Rachel's used, to be sort of kind to others, to look after others, and they'll explain that as a trait that contributes to reproductive fitness under conditions of selection, right? So the idea is that people who have a tendency to be kind to others, well, they sort of look after their own offspring, and that'll increase that they're close relatives, and that'll increase the representation of their genes in future generations. Right? The thing about that, though, I mean, that sort of evolutionary function account of naturalness is unless, in a way the people who do this sort of theorizing actually very usually aren't, unless you're sort of very optimistic about our evolutionary heritage, you're not going to think that what is in accord with our evolutionary function is necessarily morally correct, right? So, I mean, one standard thing people think here, right, is they think, not, you know, others disagree with them, but the people who sort of buy the biological stuff say, well, there are limits to the extent to which people will be kind to strangers, because that doesn't benefit them, you know, doesn't contribute to their reproductive fitness, right? But I mean, it's one thing to say that, and it's quite another thing, and the people who theorize in this way usually don't want to say this. It's quite another thing to say, okay, and it's not a good thing to be kind to strangers, right? So being kind to strangers might not be in accord with our evolutionary function, but it still be right. You know, being hostile to strangers in various ways might be in accord with our evolutionary function, but, you know, we still think it's wrong, right? So again, interpreting naturalness in terms of evolutionary function does not seem liable to give us plausible moral principles connecting morality and naturalness. Yeah? I'm open to other suggestions if anyone has. I don't know if anyone does. I mean, what you want here, right? I mean, if you like the project, I mean, if you feel some appeal or pull to the project of appealing to naturalness as a guide to moral correctness, then what you want is a story about what naturalness is that looks to you promising, or, you know, an interpretation of what naturalness is that looks to you liable to support or allow you to develop these principles. Yeah, a suggestion.
Well, I don't necessarily buy the natural law theory, but when I was looking through the book, when he was talking about children are naturally self-centered, but parents don't think that's a good thing. What about if you said that maybe children were self-centered in order to, like, combat people taking advantage of them naturally?
So you might do that in a specific case, right? I mean, again, one of the things about Rachel's discussion is that, I mean, the reason, I mean, you know, sensible but very quick is that, of course, he just, you know, he doesn't worry about what natural means. He just uses it. But look, I mean, it's one thing, isn't it, to offer a rejoinder to a particular example, right? It's another to sort of supply a guarantee or make us confident that there won't be other examples, right? I mean, you know, for this project to carry conviction, you got to be prepared to say, okay, so, you know, naturalness sort of so often gets it right about what rightness is that, you know, if it seems to you that there's something that's natural but incorrect or unnatural but correct, maybe, you know, you should give up on that and just, you know, be guided by intuitions about naturalness, right? So, I mean, it's interesting to pursue responses with respect to a single example, but unless you're confident you can do it with respect to all or at least most of them, I don't think that's going to sort of solve the problem for you, right? Yeah, good. So look, if if there isn't, as Rachel's argues, and in a slightly different way I've been arguing, if there isn't this connection between morality and naturalness, then there are certain sorts of at least somewhat familiar moral argument that you're committed to rejecting. Right? The place where you're most liable to encounter such arguments in contemporary moral thinking is in thinking about sexual morality, right? Perhaps most particularly in thinking about the morality of homosexuality. Right? So, I mean, if there is a standard argument for the claim that homosexuality is immoral, I mean, I don't know whether to say there is one or not, but I think if there is one, it's probably what we got here. Right? So look, sort of the payoff from our earlier discussion is this is not a sound argument, right? I mean, it's not a sound argument because premise one is wrong, right? I mean, what we've just seen is we can't find an interpretation of natural and unnatural such that we ought to accept this first premise, whatever is unnatural is immoral, right? So this argument's wrong. I mean, attitudes on these matters are changing right now during the time when we're doing this class, taping these lectures, right? There are some who take it that the issue of the morality of homosexuality is a genuine and controversial issue. I mean, in a certain sense, I suppose it is if there are significant bunches of people who, have opposing views on it. Right? I should say, though, that for what it's worth, my own view, like I take it Rachel's view, is that there's a big difference between this issue and the next issue to which we'll turn, the issue of the morality of abortion. Right? So, it seems to me, with respect to the issue of the morality of homosexuality, there are really not very good arguments on one side of it. Right? I mean, if what we just gave is the standard argument for the immorality of homosexuality is the best you can do, it's really not a very good argument, right? And it's not at all clear to me what better arguments would look like. This is Rachel's view, came out by way of sort of editorial decisions for earlier editions of Now as the right thing to do. There were various of those editions where he used to have two readings on the morality of homosexuality, and they're sort of both on the same side, right? They were both arguing that homosexuality is not immoral. As a matter of editorial decision, I think it's actually sensible to do what is now done in this current edition and not have two readings on the same side there, because it was curious. It was, you know, there was no other sort of contemporary issue where there was more than one reading and they agreed with one another, right? But sort of as a matter of a sense of the merits of the debate, that seems to me pretty sensible, right? And that there, I should say, I think the issue of homosexuality is, again, it's very different from the issue of abortion, right? Which we'll be turning to next time, right? I mean, I have, you know, lots of lots of people in general, lots of philosophers who've thought about this have views about the issue of abortion. But it seems to me, on the abortion issue, it's easy to see where both sides are coming from, right? It's easy to see that there are significant prima facie important moral considerations on either side of the topic, right? And in that way, despite the fact that in sort of popular discourse, homosexuality and abortion are often sort of lumped together, I think, in terms of the merits and actually also therefore sort of the philosophical interest of the discussion. You know, the abortion topic is very different from the homosexuality topic. All right, good. So we'll turn to that abortion topic next time, and we're done for today.